Well, workers' rights groups and medical organisations are trying to fight back against claims that some forms of asbestos are safe. One of those is Union Aid Abroad, and their campaign coordinator, Phillip Hazelton, joins us now from Sydney. Phillip, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
Let's look at Indonesia in particular. How prevalent is asbestos on construction sites and other areas there?
Yeah, particularly in Java, it's very prevalent. About 50% of houses in Jakarta, for example, would be containing asbestos, but across the country, about 10%. And that's with 27 factories producing asbestos roof sheets still and importing about 115,000 tonnes of fibre every year.
What medical safeguards, if any, are there in place in a country like Indonesia?
Across Asia, virtually none. There's no limit much at all or no regulation at all. So it's a very dangerous situation for particularly the workers, those up to 10,000 workers that are in those 27 factories that are producing the roof sheet. Also the communities living around those factories, because they're often in urban regional areas around people that are living. But also construction workers who are working with that material, and of course consumers who have it in their house.
And of course continued exposure, sometimes even a brief exposure to asbestos, Phillip, can lead to some awfully debilitating conditions, can't it?
Sure, there's a number of cancers that we know that are caused by asbestos exposure. In terms of mesothelioma, Australia has one of the highest rates of mesothelioma in the world. And we in the union movement have been working for many decades alongside victims to get a ban here in Australia some decades ago, but also to fight for just compensation for some of those or most of those victims of asbestos disease. So we feel a bit of responsibility to try and help Asia, to warn Asia about this coming epidemic, because it's going to be quite serious in the coming decades, because most of the world's now banned, so the asbestos lobby is really pushing market in Asia. In the coming decades, it's going to be quite an epidemic, we think, of cancers and other lung diseases like asbestosis.
So, Phillip, what would you like the Australian government to do here?
Well, the Australian government, we work closely with some parts of the Australian government. We work closely with the Asbestos Safety Eradication Agency, who provide technical support when we need it with governments across Asia and help us with some research. We obviously fundraise from trade unions and public donations in Australia, and we get some matching support from the Australian Aid Program for that. But really, we have an opportunity now, and we have some really very clear ideas about how we can move towards a regional and global ban on asbestos. And we want the Australian government to do a bit more, to step up in other parts of the government to work on this issue. One of those would be the Asia Development Bank. We have put billions into the Asia Development Bank, but they still use some of their funds, the investment they use for projects, can still use asbestos products. So in effect, Australian money is still supporting the asbestos industry through the Asia Development Bank. So the Treasurer is on the governing body of the Asia Development Bank. So we really want the Australian government to push for reform to stop Australian money being used in any investment using asbestos products.
And finally, Phillip, with the Asia Development Bank funds a lot of these building projects in question. So, I mean, there is a way they can use a lot of direct financial pressure to bring about what you and the other groups are campaigning for.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Any pressure we can have on this asbestos lobby that uses all sorts of tricks to deceive and misinform governments and communities and workers across Asia, we need to do.
Phillip Hazelton in Sydney, thank you so much for joining us as that fight against asbestos continues in our region.